Hi, and welcome everyone to today's Leica Conversation. Before I introduce today's guest, just a little housekeeping. So we want to hear from you. We want you to feel free to ask questions of our guest today. So please utilize the chat function and let us know where you're tuning in from, as well as any questions you may have for today's guest. So today, I'm happy to introduce our guest, Jason Roman, who's a New York City street photographer and cinematographer. He's self-taught, has honed his skills in the streets, talking to and engaging with the world around him, never leaving his home without his camera around his neck. Jason's career has led him around the world photographing behind the scenes images for TV and film, as well as editorial spreads and advertising campaigns. Still, it's New York City, the streets, that provide the greatest inspiration. And beyond creating art, Jason actively nurtures connections in the community and the industry. And outside of that, you'll catch him feeding and photographing the pigeons in Chinatown. So please help me in welcoming Jason Roman to today's Leica Conversation. Welcome, Jason.
John, what an intro. Thank you very much, brother. I appreciate that. Thank you guys for
Not a
having me.
problem.
It's an honor to be here.
That's great. Yeah, it's really exciting to talk to you because of all the experiences that you've had, not just with the SL3, but other Leica camera models. So I'm sure during the conversation we'll dive deep into some of those things, maybe some of those comparisons, and we'll take it from there. We'll see what questions our audience has for us. So let's start by looking at some of your portrait work, and
Cool.
just kind of let us know. I guess the camera, obviously the SL3, and then when you're shooting these kinds of portraits, like what lens are you using, and kind of talk a little bit about the process and maybe this project.
Yeah, so for me, I guess as you said before, I shoot a lot of cameras. I'm a man of many tools. And like anyone else that owns multiple cameras and a bunch of different lenses, I kind of see them as paintbrushes. So I kind of listen to what I'm feeling that day. And sometimes it's a bit of a pain to own a lot of equipment because the decision's never particularly easy. So I rely on a lot of work that's been created before me to kind of inspire me for what it is that I want to shoot. I have a portrait studio on the Lower East Side, and I kind of believe in always learning and trying to make my images a little bit better, whether that means photographing or editing. So the portrait that you're looking at just now was shot on a 50mm Apo on the SL3. And this is just a very simple moment in my photo studio of a friend, Lauren. She came by, and it's to me, taking an honest, simple portrait is one of the easiest things that you can do. And so this image, I think it just speaks volumes. I think you ask questions about who she is. There's a lot of power in her eyes there. And I'm someone that likes to push color. So this image, I feel, represents me very well.
Right. And I think that's what we'll see as we look at more of your work, is the color palette is
Hmm.
very interesting. Kind of what's your thought process in that, that you've developed kind of the signature look that embraces color.
Well, I don't know if I have a signature look, but I think that
Oh,
people
you
know
do.
that I
You
like to
do.
push color. Yeah, it's kind of a well-known
Yeah.
thing. To be honest, I heard
Yeah.
someone once said in an interview that when they edit color for emotion. And that's something that kind of
Mm,
always resonated with me, and it stuck with me. So as I'm sitting there tinkering around, it's very hard to teach my process to people because typically what I do is I really do tinker until it feels right. And so I'm going for what it is that I felt in that moment, especially with street photography. That tends to be a little bit easier. You think about, was this photo set at shot at sunset? Was it cold outside? Was it hot
mm,
outside? What is the emotional context that I'm trying to give someone through the color that I'm that I'm creating. Some people just want their images to look exposed. I'm trying to create an atmosphere with my images. So that's something that I always think about when I'm editing.
No, that's very interesting. A lot of people, I think, go with a very neutral color palette, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think utilizing color to express emotion is yet another way to use the paintbrush, right?
Hmm.
So I think it's really quite interesting. Here's another portrait. What was this for, a campaign, or what was this
This
for
was
actually?
a dear friend of mine had been waiting for me to get back in town. I was traveling a lot, and she told me she wanted to shave her hair off. And so she'd wait for me. And I had 2 days in New York City. And so I hit her up and I said, "You got to come to the studio right now
Oh, wow.
because I leave tomorrow." And she came by and I brought my clippers. And so I just photographed her shaving her head. She felt as if that her hair and the idea of her hair kind of was this conflict of about being pretty and presenting to the world this feminine exterior that she felt she had outgrown. So she came to the studio and I gave her the clippers and I helped her out and I just photographed her. And I wanted these photos to be very simple, but I think the idea, the warmth in this photo kind of like speaks for itself, right? This is again editing
Yeah,
for emotion and trying to achieve a specific look based on the environment that we're in. So this is not something that I would make cold. So
right.
it's a creative choice to make sure that these photos are orange because I do feel like this was a very personal moment for both of us, and it was very love filled. That she trusts me um, to photograph and capture this very special moment of her, and she's one of my best friends. So yeah, and
I
these are
mean,
actually
they're
some of the first
beautiful.
photos I shot on the SL3. All of these
Oh,
were on the
okay.
beta SL3 before they were out, and second person that I shot on the SL3 when
Oh,
I got
wow.
it.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
And again, were you using the 50 Apo or?
This I typically will use a 24 to 70 or a 24 to 90. Um,
Okay.
when I'm just doing a straight up portrait of a head, I tend to change to the 50 Apple because I really like the way that lens renders. The images tend to
Okay.
pop, and you get images that kind of look a bit like medium format. That first image
Yeah.
has that look, even though it's a full frame sensor, the fall off is so beautiful. They tend to look like medium format. So,
Yeah.
like this was probably the 50 Apple.
Right. And then, of
Mm.
course, you've alluded to the man, the myth, the legend, the misunderstood, perhaps,
Yeah,
Bruce Gilden.
I love Bruce. I have so much love for Bruce Gilden.
Yeah.
I dear friend, incredible mentor, just someone that casually drops knowledge, and I feel so lucky to know him. He came by when I had gotten the SL3. He came to my photo studio on the Lower East Side, and
Hmm.
I said, "I want to take a picture of you." and, and it was actually terrifying. And I set up the light. I took a couple of photos. I think I took one image of Bruce before he said, "Let me see."
Yeah.
And he looks at
Yeah.
the back of the camera, and the first thing he says to me is, "I think you can do better."
Yeah.
And so we sat there and we photographed for 20 minutes. And he's somebody that is
Wow.
not selfish with his knowledge. He's very giving. And I don't even know if he realizes that, but he's someone that I hold with a lot of admiration. And so trying to photograph and
Yeah.
show that power and that integrity in his eyes, it's like staring down a panther. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've spent some time with Bruce, and I've always enjoyed it, and I would agree that
Mhm.
he shares a lot of knowledge, um, and it's it's never a dull day when you're
Mhm.
hanging out with Bruce Gilden, that's for sure. So
No, you really have to check
yeah.
yourself and the things that you say sometimes. I can't tell you how much I hear his voice in the back of my head every day when I'm photographing certain things that he says. I remember one time I was on the phone with him and I very casually said, "Oh, I have to photograph this thing and place isn't very inspiring." And I was, just kind of rattling, the
Hmm.
talk, making excuses for why the photos could be bad, like we always do.
Right.
Oh, the space is
Right.
not very inspiring. And he jumped in really quickly and he goes, inspiration doesn't come from outside, it comes from within. And he said it so
Yeah.
cat, and it just rocked me. And I was like, right,
Yeah. Yeah.
right, right, right. Yeah. Hmm.
No, it's no, it's great. It's great to have a mentor like that. Um, and then let's see. So this was this in India?
This was
Did
in
you do
India. I was doing
a
a video
project of
project in India, and of course, I had the
okay.
SLs with me. And so whenever I get a moment, I try to. This is, I would say, my what is it? The what was that phase that everybody's in? The romance phase, the honeymoon phase. This is when
Yeah.
I first got the camera. It was on my hip. I was lugging the lenses around. I just
Yeah.
wanted to see how everything rendered, and so
Yeah.
I brought them to India with me, and we were in Bangalore, and we got to this farm, and these people were so lovely. They let me take portraits, and they were also very giving with their time. And so I shot the images you see here, and I converted them to black and white. And this one in particular, I think I sent it to some friends because I was just like, the dynamic range on this SL3. I'm an SL2 shooter,
Hmm.
and so I've spent a decent
Right.
amount of time with that. And so I took some of the recipes that I've created from my SL2, and I just slap them on the SL. Sometimes I'll just slap them on any camera just to see how these cameras
Hmm.
handle my color edits, because I think I do a very heavy processing on my images. And so a really good test for me is to put that color on a different camera and see if it can handle it. And sometimes the files break down, but what I saw with the SL3 is that the dynamic range is just, it's a champion, and it does have this fall off. I know it's the same size sensor, but there's something about these images that just immediately kind of caught me off guard, and I fell in love with it.
Right. What lens do you was this, like the 24 to 90, or you
Mhm.
think the 50
This was a
Apo or
this was the 24 to 90.
hmm
Typically when I'm doing work, I'll travel with a zoom lens, so I don't have that many options. I like to say
right.
that I can get 90% of the work done with a 24 to 70 or 24 to 90. So I make sure one of
Yeah.
those are always in my kit.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. To me, the 24 to 90 is such a hard lens to leave behind, um, because you can get that, you can still get that isolation of subject
Mhm.
even at 90 at f4. The thing I think with the Apo Summicron, the SL50, is with that heightened contrast, you're getting fall off more like 1.4 than f2. And I think that's adding, like for those really tight close-ups that you've done
Mm.
portrait-wise, that's what you're seeing, from a technical standpoint, is
Absolutely.
that heightened contrast at the point of focus and changes that transition to and from the
Mhm.
plane. It's still very natural, very, I like to call it creamy, that transition that makes our lenses look so cinematic. But when you talk about converting to black and white, and you have your recipes that you've developed, are you utilizing Capture One primarily, or
Oh,
Lightroom or Photoshop?
I only use Capture One. That is my go-to tool when I'm editing photos. And if you're somebody that plans on being on set or working professionally with teams, I usually will talk
Right.
people into using Capture One. One of my first assisting jobs with a photographer that I admire a lot was Norman Jean Roy, and I had the pleasure of being on set with him for quite a few shoots. And the first day that I got on set, he asked me to make some folders in Capture One. And I'd never used Capture One. And he basically was like, if you still want a job tomorrow, you're gonna know how to use Capture One. If you don't know how to use
You better
Capture One
Google
tomorrow, you
that.
don't have a job anymore. And so I've
Wow.
been using that app ever
Wow.
since. And to me, it's the DaVinci Resolve of photo editing. So I don't use
Mhm.
anything else when I really want to dive in.
So that's how you got your start in photography? What was assisting?
I assisted. It didn't really give me a start. It gave me a path to
Okay.
kind of learn what it is that I wanted to do with my photos. But also I find photography and style all about exposure, right? If you're lucky enough, you get introduced to the right people and the right work, and that work kind of impacts you in a way that, like, I think about color first all the time. When I shoot street portraits, I think about editorial color. And so
Mhm.
that's something that has always inspired me. So I was lucky enough to learn from people like Norman Jean Roy, Zenith Richards, and Paul Gilmore. These guys were on set with Annie Leibovitz. And so I look at those colors, and I look at that aesthetic. And
Mm.
whenever I create an image, I'm thinking about like very high-end aesthetic that I'm always trying to achieve. Am I there? I don't know. My taste sometimes doesn't match the output, but at least my taste started in a very good way.
Right. So color is your starting point when you're editing,
Well, I see color outside
after
when I'm
you've
photographing first and foremost,
right,
right? So if I
right.
see a nice wall, sometimes I'll wait by a wall until someone comes by and I'll to
Hmm.
ask them for a portrait by this wall. But I'm
Right.
typically attracted to color, even
Okay.
though I shoot a monochrome camera a lot, because I'm also attracted to expression, gesture,
Hmm.
eyes. Sometimes people ask me questions like, "Well, how'd you get someone to look this way?" And
Right.
the honest answer is that like I'd never get anybody to look anyway. They either have that expression or they don't, and that's something that I'll see on them. And if I can't get the photo candidly, I'll ask them to kind of reference whatever it was that they were thinking. One of the first
Mm.
photo books I ever owned was Bruce Davidson's Subway. That's the photo book that
Yeah.
made me go outside and start photographing. And in the book, he would say if he couldn't get the image, he would approach the person and ask them what they were thinking about. And he would say, if you wouldn't mind going back to that place, and then he'd step back and photograph them. And just the idea of having someone reference memory, it puts an expression on their face that's impactful. So I look for expression and I look for color.
Okay. But in terms of I guess the editing process,
Mhm.
you're gonna call through, get your selects, and then you're gonna pick and choose the images. Like where do you start? Um, once you've decided, yeah, this is an image I'm gonna work with,
Mm.
is there any consistency, or is it just
Oh, so when I'm making selects, you mean like if I'm going through
right,
my
right,
reel? I
right?
it's interesting because that's actually a really interesting question because I think about how fast I cull images, right? And so, for example, if I
Right.
download a very long day of shooting, something that's on a set or street photography, it's usually not as many images, but so there are times where I come back to my computer and have 2,000 images that I'm culling, right? And based off of just color and form, right? Composition, I can make a select on the images immediately. And that's before Capture One even loads in what the image actually is, right? So I'm culling my images based off of just the shapes that are in them. As I go through, I'm like,
Mm.
I know that doesn't work because there's no balance, right? Where I look at the edges of my photo. So I start starring images the moment I import them by 2 or 3. Usually I only need like 2 rounds of edits. So I'll start with 3 stars and then I move to 4 stars. And when they're fully edited, I'll move to 5 stars. And that's typically how I start. I'm looking for something that immediately stands out, and I'm very harsh with my
Mhm.
work, which is why I share one image every couple of months.
Well, I mean, that's the mark of a professional, right? You're only going to show the work that either creates an emotion in you,
Yeah.
uh, or it's significant enough of an event. You're not showing everything. Um, so I mean, I think it's difficult. That's part of the evolution, I think, as a photographer, right?
Mm,
Is that initially you think everything is great, and then slowly, even with a Leica camera,
yeah.
slowly, you develop, and you're I know myself, a lot of times I'm looking at images that are, beautiful images, sharp, great color, but if it doesn't emotionally impact me, it's hard for me to say that's a good image or a great image. So it's beyond the storytelling element, right? You're using color to kind of elicit part of that story, right? Part of that,
Mhm.
the emotion from the viewer. Uh, but I think it's difficult, I think, in general, for a lot of people to achieve that. I mean, you really have to work at it. So,
Yeah, I
well,
think it's very
yeah,
natural to be proud of the images that you create, especially when they're difficult images to make, right? We're all
yeah,
and so as we look back into our past archive of photos, there's a lot of things that in the moment I was proud that I created, but now when I look
Mhm.
back in retrospect, I'm like, well, maybe that wasn't the hardest of images. It's like the first time you shoot film, everything's great, right? Because it's difficult to
Right.
get that full roll process. Everything's in focus. So it imbues this like false sense of excellence.
Right.
But as you push
Right.
yourself more and more, you start to realize that there's layers to it, and there's more to the
Right.
image than just whether or not it's pretty. I try to only share images that I think represent who I am, and I
Right.
constantly ask myself why. You know, if I'm shooting a campaign or something like that, or just a pretty photo, there's that. But for the most part, every portrait is a self-portrait, right? So I think about who it is that I'm pointing my lens at, why I'm pointing it at them, and what this image says about me as I move through space and time.
Yeah, it's eh, there's different layers to it, right? I mean, there's
Yeah.
different techniques, there's showing motion, freezing motion, and they
Hmm.
all elicit different feelings. So um so let's talk about the natives a
Yeah.
little bit. Um interesting
Pigeons.
choice, interesting choice in a campaign, or I guess a product debut, however we want to frame it. Um, it's just interesting, and as you look at the images, you do see these pigeons have different personalities, right? And
Mm,
there's leaders and there's followers, and it's just, to me, it's just kind of interesting. So these images, I know, like in the video, it looks like you're shooting with the 90 to 280.
yeah.
Is that what you're using to capture?
Predominantly the 90 to 280 is what I'm using to
Yeah,
capture
wow.
the pigeons. Interestingly enough, the day of the video is when I discovered the style that I liked most about photographing these pigeons. I had tried absolutely everything. I've tried prime lenses, 35 millimeter M Summluxes with the screen that folds out on the SL3. I've tried 50 millimeter Apo, 24 to 90. I tried the 90 to 280 several times, and nothing was quite right until the day that I shot that video, where I kind of like got really square down on the ground and shot them up against the backdrop of New York City. And I kind
Mm.
of accidentally stumbled upon this painterly vibe, but I had taken at least 20,000 images before I arrived at this aesthetic that finally made me feel like I was making something that was worthy of the pigeons.
Yeah, I mean, the isolation is crazy, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
It,
so
I'll tell you an interesting thing, actually. I was telling my girlfriend this just the other day, actually. I sat down, I had just gone back. I've been on the road for a month, photographing for a TV show, season 2, and I got back, and it was the first day that I was able to sit down and photograph the pigeons in some time now. And I brought out some sunflower seeds, which a friend online, and Shane, had told me about. She at this even the food that you feed the birds is a thing, you know. So I'd gone the spectrum. I was feeding them dry rice, cooked rice, popcorn, and like all these things. And she was like, try sunflower seeds, which ended up being the perfect thing, because when they flap their wings, it doesn't just fly all over the place, you know. And then it's not
mm,
this white grain that's in every single shot that's clumped on the floor. So the sunflower seeds actually blended in with the concrete. And I was sitting there with these pigeons. I had shot at least 500 images, and the food was very close to my feet. And so I had to stand still so that they would come closer to me and trust me. And I just stopped photographing. I just watched them eat.
mm,
And I had such a private, personal moment where I just felt so at peace and content with what I was doing. And I realized that it wasn't about the pigeons or me. It was just this moment, or anyone else. And so that's kind of why I think that these images represent that, is that I'm not interested in the world around them. It's purely about the pigeons. And that's kind of an epiphany that I had.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's pigeons are around us, right? All the time in
Hmm.
the city, and shooting them, and um photographing their silhouette in the sky is always, an interesting exercise. But to get on their level, particularly like with the 90 to 280, um, and I guess the tilt screen was extremely helpful
It is incredibly
in
helpful.
that.
Otherwise, I'd be on my belly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I just find it interesting. I mean, how did you, I guess, conceptually even come up with the idea?
Mm.
Is there a story there um, that you'd like to share about, the kind of the chestnut of the idea that kind of sprung
Yeah,
with this project?
yeah, I think I'm someone that really loves simplicity in photography, at least the concept, the idea of it. And some of the projects that I've always loved most, like, like a Ralph Gibson's quadrants, for example, what a incredible idea. So simple, 50 millimeter at its closest focusing distance, make an incredible book about it. And I think as photographers, we tend to overcomplicate things a lot. We're always looking for this
Hmm.
incredible concept and this idea. And I actually got the call from Kieran Carnani about the SL3 at the time, and she asked me if I wanted to be an ambassador. I was like, of course, my entire career is the SL2. And at the time, I was actually staring out at this pigeon out the car window, and it was limping. And I just went through this whole spiral of thoughts about this pigeon looking like a New Yorker, and it's got a gold chain on, and it's limping. And I, like my mind was just running the gamut. And I told her, I was like, I have an idea, and it was about the pigeons. And she kind of took a moment because I guess her father used to feed the pigeons every day. He'd go out and he'd feed them before work. And she kind of told me the story about him and how he would call them the natives
Hmm.
and said we had to take care of them. And, through a little bit of research, I found that, it's our fault. We've broken the pigeon. We've removed every survival instinct they have. They used to be courier pigeons, so they're all domesticated. They don't know how to survive without us. And so, we call them rats of the sky and all these things. But the reason they live in transient areas is because they have to live off our scripts. You'll never catch them in the wild. And so to me, I've unlocked this very simple thing every day that I walk by in life. And now I find so beautiful. I can't look at a pigeon without, it's almost like passing a dog on the street, except I'm passing
Mm.
thousands of them. And so I find them
Right.
very beautiful and I spend time with it. And I think that that's the epitome of photography. That's the beauty of photography, is to find the most mundane thing beautiful, right? A beam of light on a coffee table.
Right.
It's nothing until you open your eyes and you begin to see. And that's what the Pigeon Project is to me.
In terms of, I guess, like a technical aspect of the camera, what focusing mode were you using, like, for the pigeons? Where,
Hmm.
you know, uh, like continuous autofocus with the beta animal mode, or tracking,
I've
or
tried that.
single or manual focus, or
Yeah, yeah. The animal
pigeon
mode has a
mode?
cat
I mean,
on it, so I didn't. I didn't try. I tried it. It didn't
well,
really
yeah,
work
would
too well.
cat and the cat's going to eat pigeons, so we
Yeah.
wouldn't want that. But
Exactly, the nemesis, the autofocus
right,
nemesis. But
yeah,
I ended up using a mixture of I used to use AFS, single, and then I
okay,
realized that
right,
obviously C would work a little bit better, and then the perfect recipe was using AFC with zone. And so I basically creates a little
okay,
block that I could focus on, and I
yeah.
would put them just about at their head level. And this is
Hmm.
going to sound crazy, but there's something very intuitive about using the SL3 where I would say about 75% of the time, the pigeon that I'm interested in, the camera would lock focus on that bird. And maybe it just likes the
Okay,
same subjects as me, but I'm always looking for these kind of these ratty pigeons that got a little more story on them, rather than the
right,
beautiful ones in the street. And so, this guy's got
yeah.
like a head full of dandruff, and I just find that
He's having
I just
he's having
find
a
that,
rough he or she's
yeah.
having a rough day.
They're having a
Yeah,
rough day, but their friends are
yeah.
there to back them up, and that's also another beautiful thing that I learned from Bruce Gilden. If you ever watch him talk about any one of his images, he's got these little
Hmm.
personal stories that he tells. Every photo has a story, right? And so as I'm
Right,
looking at these images, I'm looking at these birds, and these relationships are folding out in front of me. I'm telling myself these stories, which are making these photos that much more. It doesn't matter if they're real or not, It just matters that, like, when other people see it, do they feel it? Right? You created this because of something
right,
that was interesting to you. So yeah,
right.
this is me experimenting with backdrops now. I brought out a couple Apple boxes, and I would feed them next to the Apple box to kind of control the environment a little bit to see what that would look
Hmm.
like a proper portrait, with a backdrop, and that's how this is staying.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. And
That's
so, as
it's
you
a
can see,
yeah, really
ton of
interesting. Yeah,
experimenting, tons and tons and tons
yeah.
of experimenting. For this is my forever project. I'm enamored by the pigeons, so I'll spend till the end of days photographing the birds.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so is maybe there's a book in the
Well,
works. There's only
certainly.
maybe might be reaching out or
I I hope so. Whoever
somebody
like the weirder the better.
birds. Yeah. Like Hitchcock inspired. No. Yeah, that
That's
it
part
would be
two.
interesting. All right, so part two, birds two. All right, we've got a question from the audience. Joe's asking, how do you decide which equipment, camera bodies to take out on a given day?
Mm.
I guess apart from assignment-based decisions. So
Apart
I
from
guess when you're
Simon,
shooting out on the street, yeah.
yeah. So I had a incredible discovery when I was in Morocco with my brother and a good friend Gadjan. I used the SL2 one day outside to take portraits, and I took some of the most portraits that I've ever taken in Essaouira, which is this coastal town in Morocco. And I had looked at all the portraits that I had taken, and I realized that everyone that I liked was shot at 24 millimeters. And so I immediately I was like, I need to buy 24 millimeters. So I bought 24 Elmerit f2.8, and I started shooting all my street portraits with that. And then I realized that obviously the other end of that spectrum was 70. And so whenever I went tight on the head, I really liked 70. And so that kind of makes up those decisions for me, where I realize that if I do like a great portrait, typically it's going to be at 70 or 24. And when I'm thinking about what it is that I'm going to photograph for the day, that also helps, right? So if I'm going to go take pictures of pigeons, it's going to be the 90 to 280. So I would say, as advice to anybody that's trying to figure out, that has used a zoom lens or uses multiple lenses, I would say look at your files and figure out what images you like the best. And there's probably a reason for that in the focal length that you're using. If I can't decide, I just grab a 35.
When in doubt,
35 it out.
35. F8 and B there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and that's no, I think that's helpful and great information. So um, what was I guess what was your first camera ever?
Hmm.
Um, and then when did kind of Leica come in the picture, unless Leica was
I
your
wish, I
first
wish I was that lucky. That is not my story. My first camera came from a
Bruce
homie,
Gilden
Tyler
just didn't
Brown.
say here,
Yeah, yeah, could you
take
imagine?
take
You seem
this.
like you've got potential to take this camera.
Yeah, take this M4. I
Yeah,
don't use it.
that would
Yeah,
have been a dream come true. But my
yeah,
first
that'd be
one was a
awesome.
clunky C70 with a Sigma 18 to 35 art lens, which everybody is aware of. It's one of the most
Okay.
popular lenses ever
Yeah,
made. It's a great
yeah.
lens. But it was bad for having a night out. I would have to think before I grab that camera. I'd say, am I going to dinner tonight? Where am I going to be? This thing is bigger than the dinner plate. And so I'd leave it home a lot. And then the first real
Right.
camera that I got for street photography was a Fuji. And then I finally, Leica hit me up because of my YouTube channel and my presence online.
Hmm.
And I decided to buy my first Leica, which was an M7. So I bought
Okay.
my M7 about 6 years ago, was my first Leica.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, neat. So when you go out shooting, are you a one lens person, or do you like Phil Penman carries every lens he owns with him? Yeah.
Yeah, is that right?
Well, pretty much. I mean, he's maybe not every lens, but he's got 3 or 4 lenses and a couple bodies.
That's
Um,
very interesting to
and
me
that's
because he
and that's
seems
like
like someone
his.
that loves simplicity.
Uh, I think it's the complexity that allows you to believe he likes simplicity.
Yeah, there it
Um,
is.
but I mean, that's like his thing, right? Because he was a photojournalist for a long time,
Mm,
and carrying 3 bodies and 6 lenses was not a big deal. And a lot of times, I think he feels, and there's others in the same camp, right? Where if I don't bring everything I have, I'm going to miss that shot that I'm seeing here, right? Because
mm.
photography, it's all about capturing what's in your mind's eye. So I'm curious about your process and how you navigate, the gear
Mm.
situation?
I try to keep it very, very simple. For the most part, when I'm walking around outside, I travel either with a 24 and a 50 or a 35 and a 50. Just because I know that my mind works in the same way as cinema, right? I like wide frames as opposed to vertical
Hmm.
frames because wide frames are kind of invoking like cinema, right? We're looking at a story, whereas vertical invokes the canvas. And so when I shoot vertical frames, I tend to shoot way more telephoto. I don't really look at it in that perspective. And so when I'm outside, I try to establish with a 24, right? Who is this person? What's the environment
Mm.
that they're in? That's the story that I'd like to tell. And then when I want a detailed shot of them, I switch to the 50, right? So I'll have two cameras on me at all times. Otherwise, I'll just have the 24. And that's kind of how I like to move. I don't want to overcomplicate things too much by having too much equipment with me. I find that that can also lead to missing the moment if you're trying too much, or at least it can stop the creative ideas that you may have, right? So if I only walk outside with a 24, I'm not necessarily thinking about my 50, I'm just kind of like doing what I can in that moment. And those are the most empowering trips and photographic moments I've ever had, is to just lock in with a single lens. Two, though, I find is the sweet spot.
Right. No, no, I get it. A lot of times I do enjoy one body, one lens, and then thinking that focal length
Hmm.
and seeing that focal length. Um, and it's not everybody's thing, but I think as we advance and we learn, once you've mastered that field of view,
Hmm.
whether it's 35, 50, 75, 90, 24 to 90, whatever that is, you then, I think, have a better understanding, and you'll be able to concentrate more on good composition, but know, what you're seeing here, you can get in the camera.
Absolutely.
So I think I don't think there isn't a perfect way or a right way other than to own everything, right?
You got to
That,
try everything. So you got to
which
buy
which
everything.
gets expensive. I'll be the first to admit. All
Yeah.
right, so
But it's worth it
we've
in the
got some
end.
more in the end. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've always gravitated to more. Initially, like my first M lens was the Appa 75, and
Mm,
people are like, "What on an M240?" Like,
bold
what?
choice.
What is that? Are you sure? Are you sure about that? And I really liked it because that's a focal length that I see in. But it
Mm,
can be a challenge, definitely. Uh, but some of that is fun, right? To challenge yourself to see differently.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's
um,
important sometimes to refresh your perspective. I think we can if you find yourself getting kind of locked into an aesthetic or something like that, or you feel like you need to shake
right.
things up, sometimes I'll just grab the 135 and I'll go outside. I think and also the work that we consume can change that perspective. One of my favorite books in the last few years that I bought was Cop by Christopher Anderson, and he shoots telephoto the entire book. And
Mm.
I've never tried that with people other than the pigeons. But the perspective is so refreshing, and it's all very beautiful and it's artistic, and I like this idea. I don't I find they are tools, and I think that's something that
Yeah.
people need to remember, that they are tools to be used and they exist for a reason. I get it that we want to be known for one particular thing, but on occasion we can switch it up. At least for me, I'm somebody that loves to photograph the spectrum, as you can see from the work that I'm sharing. I'm
Yeah.
all over the place with what I
Right.
shoot.
Yeah. I mean, to me, the common bit is there's a piece of you in each of these images, and that's the thread. That's what we all hope to get to, is that every image, shares a bit of our emotion, but also who we are.
Mm,
And that's why we like the images that we show that we like. I think deep down, there's a connection there. So
absolutely, that's the
let me
goal.
see. We've got another question from the audience. They say, I find your color work, the color palette, specifically incredibly alluring. Curious to know more about what you find important in the color editing process.
What I find important in the color editing process, I think the most important thing for me is I hold on to photos for way too long until the color is right. I think it's important to nail the color just because it's sticking the landing to me, right? Like some of the most iconic images from the past that inspired us, whether they be film or digital, they typically have been processed in a way that the photographer wanted it to be exactly, right? No one
Mm.
that has inspired us is showing you a straight out of camera image. Rarely is that happening, right? So to me, color is really sticking the landing. And so I think being very intentional and taking the time to really obsess about color, sticking the landing of your images. And so I want to make sure that the saturation, the tone, the atmosphere that I'm looking to create is there because unless I got all that, then I didn't stick the landing.
Mm. No, I think it's, I mean, to me, it's a really bold choice
Mm.
to use color to drive emotion. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, but it's not. I think it's like for me that would be like next like 2 or 3 levels up in terms of
Mm.
creating an image to think about um, the actual color that I saw and how to amplify that to increase emotion. I think it's extremely interesting, as in terms of an editing style, and it really speaks to your specific visual signature.
Well, I
So
think I think it goes
let's take
deeper
it.
than that, right? Because like, all right,
Yeah.
if I think about it for a second, right? If we look at film, most people's innate reaction to film is nostalgia for a reason, right?
Hmm.
Those colors, some of them don't exist anymore. So immediately what we feel because of that, even though someone didn't overprocess that image, we immediately feel nostalgia, right? It's the same thing with watching a film. All the color grades that happen in a film are to inspire certain emotions. So as if
Mm.
we look at paintings, the tones that are used in paintings, it's all there to inspire a certain thing. And this is where all of our inspiration comes from, right? And so regardless or not if the art is painted, when you look at an old image, it immediately makes you feel nostalgic, and it's because of the color. Even if it's black and
Right.
white, the lack of color is going to make you feel nostalgia. So those are inherent things that if we don't consider in our images, then we're basically leaving them untapped, right? We're leaving that decision up to someone else, the camera sensor or the film developer.
Right. It's like you talk about this nostalgia. I immediately think of images I created with Kodachrome
Mm,
film. There was no color, even to this
mm.
day in digital that you could replicate that exact color. And a lot of the movies that were shot in color were that same color palette.
Mhm.
Um, and it is, it is different. It is nostalgic. I guess another question from the audience was, have you tried any R lenses? Because
Oh,
again,
yeah.
older lenses are, and I would also ask then R lenses are vintage, maybe thread mount lenses on the SL3.
Mm.
Because again, that's another way to kind of create, I think, like a timeless image. It's because of the rendering characteristics, of that
Yeah.
lens. So,
So
right.
that's actually a very appropriate question because I just bought 3 R lenses for my cinema kit. And so I shoot a Komodo X, and a couple friends, Julian Jerry and Mark, sold me some Duclos lenses. So I have the 35 Summilux, the
Okay.
50 Summilux, and a 19 millimeter V2. They're all from the 90s, but the rendering on
Yeah.
them it's excellent. The problem is that I got them all in EF, so I was they're EF mount conversions for cinema.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
basically, I
Yeah.
can put a speed booster on them, and so I got really
Right.
excited. And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to order an R camera so I can shoot with these in the street." And then I realized they're all EF, so I
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
on the SL, they look fantastic. And so, yes, to answer that question, I
Yeah.
have tried the 35 specifically and the 19, and I think they sing on the SL sensor.
the 19 is one of my favorite lenses.
Yes, I agree.
It's incredible. The other one I like is the 80 Summilux.
That's my next lens.
Another
John, you're speaking to my heart right
beautiful. I mean,
now.
and yeah, I mean, to me, the I guess part of the interesting thing is that I guess their years were EF converted because in the mid 2000s, right, with the Canon 5D Mark II, people were starting to discover, hey, how good Leica our lenses were for video,
Yeah.
particularly on a DSLR at that point. And just, instead of having to use like a lettuce adapter and a lens, you could now use these R lenses and get this very painterly cinematic
Mm.
look to it. But yeah, they're just gorgeous, gorgeous lenses.
Yeah, some of my
And it's
favorite lenses.
interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. So let's get back. We've got some more images to look at. I'm curious about this project. Um,
Oh,
it,
this
it you know, to me, it's like how sharp is sharp. Can I count the bristles in the paintbrush kind of a thing? I'm just
yeah.
curious about it and what it's about.
So, like anybody who gets a new camera, I tend to photograph everything. When you get that new camera, you're like, what does this look like? How does this color render? What is that?
Mm,
A lot of work that I don't share oftentimes is these kind of little images where it's someone's stuff and it's an essence of a person being there, but it's not necessarily a full story, right? And I'm kind of attracted to these moments where there's an absence of a person, but their vibe is still there. And so these were some images that I shot in Poland. As doesn't matter what project I'm always shooting for myself, right? So we're walking around this factory in Poland for this company that makes yachts out of plastic bottles. Incredible technology that they're using. And so they walked us around the factory and they're giving us the tour, and I'm over here photographing wires and brooms on the floor and their workers. And they're like, "Are you interested in how we manufacture these things?" I'm like,
mm.
yeah, I'll be right there. And so
It's
these are
a
photos from
room.
that
It's
moment.
inspiring me.
Hmm. It's the room, yeah, absolutely. And so
Yeah.
I'm always looking for color, I'm looking for texture, I'm looking for an energy from a person, shapes and things of that nature, just so I can go back and tinker with the files. And so these just kind of they spoke to me because this factory, I mean, look at this place. It's just like you can have a fashion shoot here, right? Yeah,
Men at work. Yeah,
yeah.
that's very cool. Very cool.
Mhm. So again, I think, I put all these images in because I think I'm someone that really I run the spectrum on how I use the cameras. It doesn't matter the body, I photograph absolutely everything under the sun with them. It doesn't matter. It's a
Mm,
pigeon, it's a crack in the sidewalk, it's a flower, it's a dusty floor in a factory, a portrait, a movie poster. The SL3 at this point right now, I think in the little bit of time that I've had it, I've kind of run the gamut on subjects. And so recently I photographed Minecraft, which is the new movie with Jason Momoa and Jack Black,
right.
Daniel Brooks. It's a video game. And so when that comes out and all the billboards are everywhere, those are my posters that I shot with the SL3. And so yeah, I think I have a well-rounded archive of images with this camera now.
So yeah, I guess from the broom to the big screen. I
From the
mean,
broom to the big
I don't
screen.
know that you could get any more diverse in terms of a working portfolio. Um, let's see. I got a couple more questions here. It says
Cool.
Amanda's asking, do you work most often with a project in mind or just shoot all the time?
I always have a project in mind. I haven't put out anything in terms of books or anything like that yet, but the ultimate goal is
Mhm.
a couple of New York books. I don't want to say
Okay,
the name of them now, but I'm always thinking about those two things when I photograph outside. Um, and
gotcha.
so that helps a lot when you're walking around and you don't know what to do. Try to chuck it into a project or just go sit with some pigeons. Mhm.
Do you know that the lady in Union Square that feeds the pigeons
I've met
in
a lot
Union
of people
Square
that
Park?
feed the
Yeah,
pigeons, and at the
yeah, that's
beginning of this
crazy.
project, I did try to incorporate
Yeah.
portraits of people like that, but
Uh-huh. Yeah.
nothing made me happy the way sitting with those pigeons
Yeah.
by myself did, and so,
Yeah.
yeah, I decided to go completely selfish with this.
Yeah. It's just, yeah, it is interesting that, you know, you go around the different parks in New York and you'll see people that it's like part of what they do is feed the pigeons. Um, so the next series of images, I think, to me, really pushed the envelope in terms of what the camera can do.
Mhm.
Um, so, I mean, I'd like to hear kind of what how you thought about shooting it in this concert. I think you were in Nashville
Yeah, this was in Nashville.
shooting.
I'm forgetting the place, the venue, not that they care or anything, but
Yeah,
but it was a concert in Nashville. Jason, Momoa's been
yeah.
touring with his new band, Oof Ta Ta Ta. Just like a fun passion project, you know, it's
Hmm.
who knows if it'll turn into something if I photograph them enough, maybe I'll have a project there, but, in the
Right.
meantime, you know, I just brought my cameras and I hopped on stage with him and I shot him while he performed, and, it just, you know, it's fantastic. The colors, the detail that I was able to get out. Some of these files are 6400, 10,000 ISO. And I mean, I'm
Yeah,
pushing these images. Like this color is not straight out of camera.
yeah. Now that's to me that you know, anytime you're shooting this type of venue, um, it really you get a real good idea of how good the camera sensor is in terms of its ability to hold dynamic range.
Hmm.
And you know, I've found that the SL3 just I haven't seen a sensor really do a better job
Yeah. I
in
mean, look
terms
at the
of still
edges.
holding the highlights. And then if you wanted to bring out more detail in the shadow area, 5 or 6 stops. Um, but it's this is always a great, you know, a great test
Hmm.
um,
And this image
of
is a
of
perfect
the
example of that. You can see there's all
yeah,
that information is retained there in the center mass.
right,
You can lift
right,
those shadows if you want to. The highlights are
yeah,
perfectly balanced. And I think
yeah,
that that's to have a camera that you can trust like this. You know, I know
yeah,
these SLs so well. I've shot them in some of the worst lighting conditions imaginable. Not that there's such thing as bad light, just matters what you do with
right,
it.
right,
But it pushes the camera to the edge, you know, with the dynamic range. So to see
right,
those highlights on that fur, but also know that there's information there in the shadows and exposed for those highlights, particularly, it's
right,
I know what I'm gonna get when I come home. And so that gives me peace of
yeah.
mind.
Yeah, and I think that the noise is very film-like. You know, I mean, it's 6400. I wish, you know, 400 speed film was that good. I mean, it's really, I mean, it's really, I think what we're doing to improve that, uh, like high ISO. I mean, I've shot up to 12,500 and been able to, you know, clean up within, you know, Lightroom or Capture One, the noise just enough, but it's still the noise is still there. But it's more like film grain,
Yeah,
and you know
it's organic. Yeah.
that adds right the organicness, but also the emotion um, of that. You know, if it looks like plastic, it's not
Mm-hmm.
really you know that
Yeah.
that interesting.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that's something that I've leaned into more as I go deeper and deeper into my photographic journey is just to not obsess over the stuff too much, the grain and all that. You know,
mhm,
people love these
right,
images and you can see in the edges. I mean, I pride them. I do like reverse vignettes and I'm kind of breaking down
right,
the image a little bit, but it adds emotion to it, you know? Yeah,
yeah,
I think about
definitely.
speaking to people like Ralph Gibson, where I would complain about the noise level on the M10R, and he'd be like, "Are you making prints?" And I'm like, "No." And he's like, "So what the hell are you?" What are you even talking about? You know, I just gotta like check you real quick. And I'm like, right, right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
so
it's yeah, it's just I think we all get a little hung up on uh, how clean we want everything.
Hmm.
But, there is something to, noise that makes things more emotional. And to me, it makes it more timeless.
Mm,
If it looks too perfect, it's definitely the here and now.
yeah.
When a lot of times myself, like if I'm taking an image, something that I really like, that I emotionally connect with, I like it to be that you can't really tell when it was taken. Like, was it
Hmm.
taken 30 years ago, or was it taken yesterday? Um, it's just, and that's something, when we talk about lens choice and that kind of thing, that's definitely part of it.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
think about
So,
that timelessness in images as well. You know,
yeah,
what are
it's,
we showing,
I
right?
think,
I try to hide a lot of things in my images to make sure that they're not dating themselves.
yeah, yeah. Well, with the pigeons, I think you've done extraordinarily well
Yeah, who
with
knows how
that.
old those pigeons are, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, so we got a couple more questions from the audience. So, um, what do you think about social media and the role it plays in promoting your projects specifically?
Hmm. Um, what do I think about social media? I think that I wouldn't exist without social media, and so
Mm,
I don't, I know, I know how hard it was for photographers that came before us, creatives, visual storytellers, whatever it may be, to show your work before social media was much harder than it is to get discovered now, right? And so I'm not somebody that particularly is upset with social media, even though I know that it's not maximizing our ability to grow in this moment because it's
hmm
changed so much. But that's with anything, right? This hasn't even been around that long. So our ability to adapt has to be stronger than the platforms that we use, right? So if it's reels, then it's reels, right? And if you don't want to do that, then like, that's on you. But back in the day, people printed their work out and they showed it to someone. And so I'm very grateful for social media, and I understand that it is, at least for me, the new form of a website, right? If I can show
hmm
somebody my work very quickly in one space, that helps me. Rather than showing my website sometimes or whatever it may be. So I really appreciate social media, and I'm constantly trying to figure out ways to use it best to my ability, even as I grow busier and I don't have time to cut reels I would like to. you know?
Yeah, you're extremely busy. I mean, you're always going somewhere.
Yeah, I haven't been in
In
the
New York,
country, but
very little. So, which is great, right? So, how do you think the Pigeon Project um, has impacted you? I mean, have you seen any, I guess, uptick, or I mean, how do you feel?
it's
I
been
get
received in a
to me
way.
again. I guess, yeah. I just think the choice was interesting.
Hmm.
Um, and I keep wanting to say, do you think it pigeonholed you? But that wouldn't be right. But
I appreciate it.
I'm just wondering, um, was there any hesitation in that decision about it? I mean, it's to me the work is awesome, but like you said, it took maybe 20,000 images. Was there ever like a doubt, like, what am I doing?
Oh,
Can I
so much
can I make
fear.
this work?
So I was
Yeah.
terrified. The moment So I had to send an approval to Leica AG, right? The headquarters had to approve the project
Right.
because it's a new camera, it's the SL3, so they want to know what everybody's shooting. And I told them, what I had to do. And I was certain that they were going to say no. I was like, there's no way in hell they're going for these pigeons for a launch video. And they said yes, which made it a reality, right? So now I have to go shoot these pigeons. And I would come home so defeated because I download the images on my computer and I'd look at them and they were just pictures of birds. That's it. It wasn't
Mhm.
anything special. The angles weren't right. They weren't interesting. It wasn't art yet. And I enjoyed the challenge, and I'm someone that typically runs towards fear. But
Mhm.
the thought of it pigeonholing me never really came into my mind. I think once I discovered the style that I like the best, I saw the potential. I saw a project that could possibly define me. And I think that that is a really special place to be in your career as a photographer, to kind of come across this one moment that you realize, wow, this could be my forever thing that I'm known for. And the reason why I started to feel that way is because how people received the pigeons, the amount of photos that I would get of random pigeons every day. They could just be a pigeon walking down the street, and somebody would send me a photo or a video of this pigeon.
Wow.
And I think the reason why it resonated with people so much is because it is a reminder that everything around us, as cliche and cheesy as it sounds, you can find
Mhm.
beauty in everything around you. And the obvious is always the most impactful, right? The things that we walk
Right.
by every day. I think Andre Wagner once said something about how we travel all over the world seeking beauty, but like sometimes it's right in front of our door, right? And so you look at the projects of him photographing his neighbors, it's incredible. And, you know, I think it's a reminder to everyone that just to slow down and kind of, you know, look for the obvious sometimes, because I think we overlook these things. And so I love the pigeons. I love the project, and it's something
Yeah.
like I said, I'll always do it.
Well, I think you've really made it your own, by figuring out the angle and the lens and the look and how everything's color graded. Um, to me, it it fits you in terms of that visual signature. All right,
Mm.
so we have one last question before we wrap. So, looking back on your path as a photographer and filmmaker, what's something you know now that you wish you knew when you started?
Ah, what's something I wish I knew now? Uh, Man, ignore all the advice that you find online. Just ignore it completely and utterly. Throw it away and put it in the trash. People will tell you don't crop your photos, don't color grade your photos, don't shoot with this lens, don't do. Just find your own path and always ask yourself why. Why am I using wide? Why am I
Mm,
shooting 24? Because it makes me feel like I am a participant in the actions that are happening around me and not a voyeur. That's why I shoot 24. So ask yourself why and come up with your own rules. Don't shoot for anyone but yourself, right? You're not out here to make work for other photographers, because 90% of the people that are can consume your work don't own cameras. Shoot for yourself. Ask yourself why. Throw out all the trash you find online, because it's going to slow you down. You know, you'll find your
yeah,
way best if you find people that you really respect in this industry and a strong community, and let that be your guiding factor, not the things that hold you back. I wish I knew that a lot sooner, because I used to like stay up at night thinking about, oh, did I overdo this? Did I do that? But they said online you shouldn't do this. And I still meet people that are constricted by the things that they've heard online, that really it's just noise. At the end of the day, is it a good photo? That's it.
yeah. If it speaks to you, right, and you have an emotional connection
Mm,
with the subject, that's what I think we're all trying to get to. It can be easy to take a technically perfect image, but it's harder to, put yourself, a piece of you in it, because it's risky.
mhm.
Um, and then to do that all the time. And to me, it's the creative output of photography. It's that outlet that allows you to express yourself creatively. And
Mhm.
it's a lot of fun. It's something you can do your entire life, and you're always learning, right? You're always changing things and moving on. So that's
Absolutely.
great. Well, yeah, Jason, thanks so much for spending the time with us and having this conversation as we talked about your work. It was great, discovering your process and everything, that you've learned along the way. It's great. So thank
Thank
you.
you, John. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Thank you, Like Academy, like a camera. This was incredible. It was a great privilege to be here talking to you about the work.
yeah. No, we appreciate it very much. So we have a couple quick announcements. So we do have some upcoming workshops. First is product workshop. So if you've got a camera, and in fact, if you have an SL3, we've got a workshop I'll be teaching in the DC area at the end of the month. I want to say it's June 29th, but that QR code will get you all of the programs for product. We also have Seeing with I guess Revere Beach with Stella Johnson in July in the Boston area. It'd be a great workshop if you're looking to explore your street chops with someone who is an incredible instructor, very encouraging. And I've heard so many great things about her workshops that I highly recommend it. And then also, if you're in New York or want to get to New York and see it from the sky with Stefan Vanesco, this is a great opportunity to shoot from a helicopter. I've done it several times and I've survived, so I highly recommend it as well. So it's a lot. It's a lot of fun.
Is it you, John? Are you here with us?
No, no, it's and then I'll be producing this workshop with Adam Lerner for automotive photography out in the New York meatpacking store in August, and that is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to hopefully have a nice selection of cars and a few models to shoot. So again, you can scan the QR code and get more information about that program. And stay in touch. These are our Instagram handles. If you want to check out more of Jason's work, there is his IG as well as his website. So that's it for today's Leica Conversation. Again, thanks everybody for hanging in with us. We went a little over. And Jason, again, thanks very much for being a part and having a great conversation.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone that joined.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you.